Now, today, on today's episode of the Majority Report, Justice Kennedy has announced his retirement. And this is going to be really devastating. This, again, earlier in the show, we said that if he hadn't announced today, then it would be unlikely that he was going to, but it is clear that he has decided to retire. Those cases that had interested him had already been adjudicated and were punted. The court, with a replacement for Kennedy in the form of another Neil Gorsuch, is lost. For probably a generation or two. I guess it's conceivable Clarence Thomas may retire in the next 5 to 10 years. Maybe he retires a year from now to allow Donald Trump to pick his successor. But you've got Alito, Gorsuch, John Roberts, and Thomas on the court. Those other guys are all in their 40s, I think. Maybe early 50s. Kennedy's in his 80s. We're talking about 30 years of right-wing dominance on these courts. There is no way for Democrats to, they could attempt a filibuster, but it is, I think that is gone now. They could have, I said, but that is gone. Obviously, McConnell did that because the moon fell into Lake Michigan, I guess about a year ago. It's a big deal. And, this is one of those things where, protests, I don't know how much impact they can have, but hugely important, so that at the very least you can tell your kids that you tried.
Not just protests, like mass waves of whatever kind of resistance we can come up with is what we need right now.
Yeah. Super bad situation.
Like, I am legitimately afraid they're going to turn over Roe versus Wade after that decision on the crisis pregnancy centers. That really seems like what they're ramping up to.
I think it's unlikely that that with another pick in the mold of Gorsuch that they do not. I mean, there's always these cases that are basically queued up for this, and so I think it's very likely that we see something that.
I don't know if there's anyone from, say, my generation that is going to be against pack the court argument.
I mean, that's the thing, is that you have to have, that's what has to
like, that should be a new abolish ICE as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm not going to hold my breath for the Democrats to do that or any of the stuff that our guest outlined on that episode. The name escapes me, but I think we need to look to other countries for what we should be doing right now. In addition to, obviously, voting in more progressive politicians. Like, they had a massive women's general strike in Poland over reproductive rights. And we should start seeing some of that here.
I would hope so.
Like, people aren't going to take that lying down. We shouldn't.
I agree. And there's going to be, I think it's the Democrats. I worry about the performance of the Democrats in the judiciary hearings. Obviously, there's not much they can do to stop a nomination, but they can make it clear where a nominee stands and begin to, progressives have failed miserably over the past 20, 30 years to really articulate the relevance of the court to their voters, have just failed miserably at it. Progressive politicians, progressive organizations.
It's depressing when progressives don't seem to get the importance as well as certain like half political Republican voting family members of mine do.
Yeah, the right is so much more aware of the implications of the court, and maybe it's because that has prevented, it has allowed abortion, it has allowed gay marriage, it has, segregated schools or desegregated schools. It segregated them as well, but subsequently desegregated them. And I don't know. This is bad. I mean, this is, we're going to have to, the idea of court packing, I think you're right, has to become a mainstream position, quick for the Democrats. Not too quick, because Donald Trump is still the president and the Senate still control having 4 more Gorsicks on there would be a problem.
I decided we need 3 guys to replace Kennedy.
All right, let's go to IMs. Bill Maher made fun of Mike Cernovich on Friday. This is one of the rare segments I enjoyed for the most part, but he went after Cernovich at 3:20. We should look for that. We'll play it tomorrow. Yeah, caller, I'm sorry for being so quick with you, the libertarian caller. It's just that I didn't want to hear about that anymore when I saw the news about Kennedy.
Don't apologize to him.
Well, I was a little bit rude, and I didn't want to do that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to everybody for my rudeness. I was a little upset about that.
No worries.
Thames Darwin. Sam, I just want to say I think the reaction of conservatives and the right generally to Maxine Waters and the victory of Ocasio-Cortez is telling. They're clearly afraid of growing political power from the left and the real refusal to accept compliance with Trump's agenda. We have to keep applying public pressure on the administration, push truly progressive candidates. If the mainstream Democrat Party wins, they'll give the whole thing Obama's Iraq war treatment, and we'll be back at square one. We can't let that happen. I agree with you. Largely, a lot of the primaries are over. And there was, there was not a wholesale change. We need to continue to pressure the Democrats, both through primaries that exist and, through other means. When you hear stuff like, Nancy Pelosi coming out for PAYGO, it is, it's just shocking to me. Matthew Film Guy, just want to say hell yeah and take 1/16 credit for last night's big win in my district of Astoria, Queens by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I supported her despite my gratitude towards Joe Crowley for his help in getting semi-trucks off my street in Astoria Boulevard, who says all politics are transactional, and
Twisting
despite
the knife.
his clearly excellent taste in puppies, i.e. our cute brown dog Dudley, seen here in this tweet being lovely caressed by the most recent member of Congress to be replaced by a Democratic socialist. Feel free to use and share. Matthew Film Guy with a picture of Joe Crowley petting his dog.
Aww.
This is good for Matthew Film Guy. P.S. I'm so glad I got to vote for a candidate who supports a Green New Deal. Anthony Kennedy, double suck it, Jimmy. Definitely time for me to start to pack the court for any next Democratic president. At a minimum, FYI, there's a slim opportunity to save net neutrality. The Congressional Review Act already passed through the Senate and needs only 218 House representatives to sign the discharge petition in order to force a vote to reinstate net neutrality. Hope springs eternal. A Square. Sam, what a prescient interview with a professor on fascism. His last words will stay with me. Resistance is no longer an option. It's just necessary each week. Worse than the one before. Thanks for starting the show with that bright light of the Ocasio election, but I feel like repeating Sam Jackson line from Star Wars. They have the courts, the Senate, and the presidency, but the courts. That was the prize and sure way to entrench the white oligarchy, corporate minority, and Jamie, it's beyond depressing, but DSA is giving us life. I love Sarah Palin. As someone who likes CNN, their whole coverage nowadays revolves around trying to get a segment viral for YouTube. That's why they bring on people they know are a retainer for Trump, so he can lie and say something stupid and someone else on the panel can explode. Thanks for standing up against Jake Tapper. You're one of the good ones, Sam. Chappie 1, Sam is a 35-year member of the National Association of Letter Carriers. I'm not as worried about Janice. Federal jobs are already open shops, and yet our membership is high. Shaming works well. No scabs. Pajama Boy. I think it's possible Sarah Sanders went out to the Red Hen restaurant on purpose, hoping to get kicked out. It's certainly been a distraction. I don't think so. The way that seemed to have gone down, I don't think she could have known that people would have cared. But I hope when they go out to restaurants in the future, they do that with an eye to getting in.
Her using the official White House Twitter
That
account,
was on purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, because she knew like her own account wouldn't create as much of a storm.
Yep. Here in Oklahoma, rural progressive Okie, I was working for a progressive who was a Bernie-crat running in the Congress here in Okie's 5th District. The day before the election, he was caught dismantling the yard stands of another candidate, so I had to resign from the campaign. The establishment candidate ended up getting over 40+%, and they don't really stand for anything and don't support single payer. The establishment candidate, progressive candidate, will be going to the runoff together in August. I don't know if I follow that, but okay. Leon Gittins. Hi, Sam. Quick update on what's happening across the pond. Hold on one second. Okay. Let me just read this one thing. I'll get back to the phones in a second. Leon Gittins, quick update on what's happening across the pond. As you know, Donnie Smallhands is coming to this great city of London, and people have been really organized to make sure he hears and feels the anger all over that's been done, especially the separation of children. Fortunately, the state's fighting back. In the last month or two, my students, who happen to be the most vocal and politically active, were arrested while attending a meeting that was organizing demonstrations against Trump. They were charged with conspiracy to breach the peace and banned from attending any demonstration for the next 2 years. Holy crap. That's what happens when you don't have a First Amendment in that country. Although here they're just a lot more sort of like less formal about it. We're just going to harass you and throw you in jail for a night or two, and then, who knows what could happen. This Tory government is really trying not to piss off Trump so they can hopefully get some sort of trade deal after Brexit. And they really want to keep the demos to a minimum and pray that Trump doesn't get the hump. But a bit like the banks, the demos are going to be too big to fail. Leon of London. Good luck with that. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Ronald Reagan.
Oh, Ronald Reagan. Could you make your phone sound worse?
Hold on. Yeah, probably. Can you hear me?
Yes. Are you on a speakerphone inside of a forklift? That's what it sounds like. You're in some type of like heavy metal.
Let me try this.
Let me
try this.
Yeah,
Let me try this.
That's a little
Let me
better.
try this.
What's going on?
Okay. Well, I decided to call you even though I find you generally uninteresting and culturally irrelevant.
Well, I appreciate that.
Nevertheless, I got called out by some other people at the Dave Rubin show. They said I was unfair, and they said that you and progressives alike don't have the balls to debate them face to face.
Isn't that guy going to call in? I keep waiting for his call.
Well, the guy who said you don't have the balls,
right?
I DM'd him. I said, hey, just let me know when you call in, and I'll see what I can do to get you to the front of the line. And he said that he's actually uninterested in debating you because he finds you uninteresting and culturally irrelevant. So,
but wait a second.
Who has the balls now?
Right. I guess maybe, and that's because I have no balls. Had I had balls,
right,
maybe I would be more culturally relevant. I understand. Yeah, I have to say, now, Ronald Reagan,
circular.
Listen, I know that you're friendly with this guy. You've obviously been going back and forth. I have to say that I'm a little skeptical when I hear something like that. I'm a little skeptical about how sincere the guy is. It sounds more like to me that he might be afraid to debate rather than me being culturally irrelevant.
I don't know. It could be. I wanted to. I've got two things to say.
Okay.
So the first would be on this late breaking news, which is superbly depressing about Justice Kennedy. There's obviously big things that the courts decide. Obviously, like abortion or gay marriage. But I would also say, as a practicing lawyer, I have a law degree. I don't know if you know that, but
Somewhere.
Every day I get a Lexus email sent to me with Ninth Circuit decisions on immigration issues, which is just one narrow slice of the decisions that are made. There's also decisions on things like Social Security, disability, or whatever, criminal law, all types of laws and issues. And every day there's hundreds of decisions coming down throughout the country from these circuit courts. And each decision has the potential to affect hundreds or thousands of lives, and they're things that you don't hear about on the news because they're not big or sexy stories usually. And so it's not just Kennedy, but it's this sort of unrelenting assault on the judiciary, and the fact that he's been able to appoint so many judges.
Record number of judges at this time in his administration that he has been able to appoint to the federal judiciary, which are lifetime appointments.
Right, and that's going to hamstring activists and people in ways that we don't even see coming. And so my point is, you sound a little depressed about Anthony Kennedy, but you should actually be much more depressed. So
I appreciate that. Thank you for the call.
You are. One other thing. I'm not sure if I'm quite being depressing enough. And so I've been getting a lot of calls today. I live in central Washington, and a little ways from here, there's an area. If you drive through central Washington, it's all very agricultural. And every 5 miles or so, you'll just be out on a country road. There will be a sign in Spanish saying, pickers needed, workers needed, help needed. Big wooden signs, hand painted, almost never in English, always in Spanish. And there's little communities that are, mostly Hispanic or people who live on the actual farms and do this work. And so these are mostly my clients. I've been receiving a lot of calls today that ICE has set up roadblocks out in this very rural area, blocking people from leaving the farms that they're working on and just going through and asking for papers.
Jesus.
And loading people onto buses to be processed. And I think it's an important point. This stuff, besides being cruel and unusual, it's also bad for our economy, but this is the agency that was created like post 9/11. 9/11, I don't know. You used to be sort of unclear on whether you thought 9/11 was a tragedy. You cleared that up a few years ago. 9/11 was a tragedy, and we should try and prevent other 9/11s. Like there's real work there to be done on preventing terror attacks, human trafficking, these sorts of things. These actions, whether it's separating kids at the border or just sifting through farm workers to find people who are undocumented, they don't at all in any way move the ball towards getting us to the goal of being safe. And in fact, it cuts the opposite way. I made this point on the show before, I guess, but law enforcement is a finite resource. For every bus of people you're loading up, you've got officers and resources that aren't being used.
Zero-sum game. Zero-sum game.
All the talk, right? For all the talk of MS-13 and these scary things, I don't see a lot of work being done, to actually keep us safe. So stuff is fucked up right now. But yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your calling in to tell us that, Ronald Reagan. That was very kind of you. Yes.
If I've got more bad news, I'll call back tomorrow.
Thank you. We will put you on the bad news hotline. Ronald Reagan.